You know, usually when you walk into a museum and you lock eyes with a classic painting, the distance between you and the canvas is, well, it's
Yeah.
palpable.
Oh, absolutely. You're very clearly the
Yeah,
observer.
right. You're in the present day, standing in this brightly lit gallery, and the person in the frame is just a relic of the past.
Trapped in oil and varnish.
Exactly. Posing stiffly for all eternity, wearing clothes that haven't been in fashion for, centuries.
Yeah.
But have you ever locked eyes with a painting and felt, even just for a split second, like the subject was about to speak to you directly?
Oh, yeah. Like they just noticed you walking into the room.
Yes. That exact feeling.
It is a profoundly unsettling experience when it happens, honestly,
Mhm.
because it collapses that temporal distance entirely.
It really does. You stop being a passive observer taking in historical data, and suddenly you feel like an active participant.
Right. In whatever psychological drama is unfolding inside that frame,
Yeah.
your brain almost forgets that it's looking at, pigments smeared on woven fabric.
And that specific electric feeling of connection is exactly what we are exploring today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are looking at a 350-year-old optical and psychological magic trick, which is Johannes Vermeer's iconic girl with a pearl earring.
A masterpiece.
Truly. And the mission here is to figure out how Vermeer managed to bypass our logical brains to create such a, visceral sense of reality for you, the viewer.
It's really the perfect subject for this kind of analysis because right at the center of this painting is a fascinating paradox.
Mm.
This girl possesses one of the most famous faces in the entire history of art. I mean, she's routinely referred to as the Mona Lisa of the North.
Right, which naturally implies she's an incredibly important, highly specific individual.
You would think so, yeah.
Because when you think of the Mona Lisa, you think of a real historical portrait of a specific woman.
Lisa's Gerardini, right.
Exactly. Someone whose identity, family, and social standing have been endlessly debated and analyzed by historians. But here is the massive plot twist with Vermeer's masterpiece.
Here it comes.
As ubiquitous as her face is, nobody actually knows who she was.
Nope, not a clue. And the mystery goes quite a bit deeper than just, a lost birth certificate or an unrecorded commission.
Right.
The reason nobody knows who she was is because this painting, despite everything our modern eyes tell us, isn't actually a portrait at all.
See, I struggle with this. I really struggle with the idea that she's not a real person.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is, because we are so conditioned to look at a highly rendered face in a fancy gold frame and just assume it's a documentation of a breathing human being.
Someone who sat in a wooden chair for 50 hours.
Yeah. A wealthy patron, a merchant's daughter, someone who paid good money to have their exact likeness immortalized. So are we saying she was entirely fabricated?
Well, what Vermeer was doing here belongs to a very specific stylistic category in 17th century Dutch painting. It's called a tronie.
A tronie.
Right. And a tronie is fundamentally different from a portrait. The goal wasn't to capture the exact, flattering likeness of a paying customer.
So what was it?
It was an exploratory study. The artist was using a face merely as a vehicle to experiment with something more abstract.
Like what?
Like an exaggerated facial expression or exotic costume pieces or just studying the way light falls across a particular mood.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Sure.
So to put it in modern filmmaking terms, it's closer to a character study or like a cinematic mood board.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. A director might sketch out a generic, unnamed character just to test out a specific lighting rig.
Or to see how a heavy velvet fabric absorbs shadow.
Exactly. Or to capture a highly specific, nameless vibe. The person's actual identity isn't the point at all. The aesthetic experiment is the point.
That is a very apt comparison, yeah.
Yeah.
And the implication is staggering when you really internalize it.
It's wild.
This world-famous girl, this deeply human face that millions of people travel to The Hague just to stand in front of.
Might never have existed.
Exactly. She could be a complete composite, a fictional character constructed entirely in Vermeer's mind just to test out a turban and a pearl.
But this is where the theory rubs me the wrong way, I have to admit.
Oh, how so?
I just have to push back on the idea that she's just a mood board. You don't get the Mona Lisa of the North from a generic utilitarian sketch.
Fair point.
If she is essentially a nameless mannequin used to test out exotic props, why are we still so obsessed with her?
Right.
Why does she feel so undeniably, almost uncomfortably real? A generic character study should feel generic, not hyperspecific.
Well, this raises an important question.
Okay.
That tension you're pointing out gets to the absolute core of Vermeer's genius. The reason she doesn't feel generic is precisely because she isn't weighed down by the ego and the demands of a real paying patron.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, think about the constraints of portraiture in the 1660s.
Okay.
If this were a portrait of a wealthy aristocrat, Vermeer would have been severely constrained. He would have had to flatten the lighting to flatter her nose, for instance.
Oh, to hide any imperfections.
Exactly. He would have had to obsessively render the specific lace of her collar to document her family's wealth. He would have been forced to pose her in a way that communicated her social status.
Right, so he would be obligated to paint her resume, essentially.
That's exactly it. He'd be painting her ego and her societal rank, but by painting a tronie.
By not having a real customer.
Right, by completely stripping away the need to document a recognizable important person. Vermeer freed himself from those commercial constraints.
They could just paint.
Exactly.
Right.
He wasn't painting a 17th century aristocrat. He was painting raw, unfiltered human emotion. He was able to focus entirely on universal expressions that our brains are evolutionarily hardwired to respond to.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. The anonymity is actually what makes the connection so pure. We don't have to navigate her historical context. We just navigate her humanity.
Spot on.
But that leads us to the mechanics of the painting. If she is a fictional creation or, an anonymous model serving a broader purpose, how did Vermeer physically trick our brains into feeling this lifelike connection?
Right. The actual technique.
Yeah, if we look at this like a masterclass in capturing emotion for, say, a group of art students, what is happening on the canvas that makes her feel so alive?
Well, there are two very subtle, very deliberate visual cues that dictate our psychological response to her face.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the action of her eyes. Notice that she isn't sitting square to the canvas, staring forward in a traditional posed manner.
Right, she's not facing us directly.
No, her body is angled away into the dark background, but her head is actively turning over her left shoulder to look back at us.
Here's where it gets really interesting
Yeah.
because it creates this incredible sense of momentum. If you spend time really looking at her posture, she is completely in motion.
Yes, exactly.
It has the energy of a candid snapshot taken a fraction of a second after a sudden noise.
A reaction shot, basically.
Yeah. Let's think about the narrative implied by that pose. She is facing away into the darkness, perhaps walking away or just lost in thought. And then you, the viewer, step onto the creaky floorboards of the studio. She hears the noise. She pivots her head.
And boom.
Her wide eyes lock onto yours in that exact split second of surprise and recognition.
That sense of sudden, incomplete action is incredibly important. And it is amplified tremendously by the second cue.
Which is...
Her mouth. Her lips are slightly parted.
Yes. Oh my gosh, as if she is right on the absolute verge of vocalizing something.
Exactly.
If she could speak, she is mid-breath. You can almost feel the sharp intake of air as she turns to see who just walked in.
You really can.
She's about to say, oh, it's you, or maybe who's there.
Right.
She is reacting to the viewer in real time. It completely shatters the barrier between the painted world and the physical gallery.
It does. And the mechanics of why this works so well on the human brain are fascinating. For those art students we mentioned.
Right, taking notes.
Vermeer understood that rendering perfectly static, resting features creates a beautiful but ultimately dead object.
A still life of a face.
Precisely. By implying action, the turning of the neck, the parting of the lips, he forces the viewer's brain to anticipate what happens next.
Because we want to finish the story.
Exactly. Our brains are narrative machines. When we see an action frozen mid-completion, our cognitive pathways just light up, trying to resolve the movement. He created an interactive emotional loop rather than a static visual one.
He makes the viewer the missing piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
She isn't just turning, she's turning to look at you. She's opening her mouth to speak to you. It forces a relationship between you and a girl who is likely just a ghost of Vermeer's imagination.
And it's that exact anticipation of movement, that dynamic tension in her turn, that naturally draws your eye down her face and straight to the center of the canvas.
Right to the focal point.
Which, ironically, is where Vermeer pulls off the most audacious technical lie in the entire painting.
Oh, we are talking about the pearl.
We are talking about the pearl.
The very object that gives the masterpiece its name.
The very same. The defining feature of Girl with a Pearl Earring is that luminous, impossibly heavy, perfectly spherical pearl hanging in the shadows.
It's iconic.
But if we analyze the physical paint on the canvas, many art historians and technical experts point out a rather shocking fact.
Which is?
It is highly unlikely to be a real pearl, both historically and technically.
So, what does this all mean? Are you saying the most famous piece of jewelry in the history of Western art is essentially a 17th century optical illusion?
Quite literally, yes.
Yeah.
If you bypass the overall impression of the painting and actually zoom in macroscopically on the earring itself, the physical reality of the pearl completely dissolves.
It just disappears.
Pretty much. As a casual viewer, you expect to see meticulous, tiny brushstrokes, blending complex whites, grays, and silvers to carefully carve out the round, heavy volume of a massive jewel.
Sure, you expect anatomical precision. You expect layers of glaze.
But that isn't what is sitting on the canvas.
I actually pulled up a high-resolution microscopic scan of that section of the canvas before we started, and it is almost comical how little paint is actually there.
Isn't it wild?
It is not a solid rendered object at all. It is constructed from just two very deliberate, very confident brushstrokes of light.
Just two.
There is a sharp, bright white highlight at the very top where the light from an unseen window would be striking the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And then, down at the bottom, there is a softer, broader reflection, which represents light bouncing up from her stark white collar.
Right.
And in the middle, where the actual mass and weight of the pearl should be.
There is almost nothing. Just the dark, vaguely suggested underpainting of her neck and the shadow.
It's fascinating because it completely defies logic. How do two streaks of white paint against a dark background convince millions of human brains that they are looking at a heavy, three-dimensional object?
What's fascinating here is it reveals Vermeer's supreme mastery over the mechanics of human perception.
Okay, break that down for me.
He intuitively understood optical heuristics centuries before neuroscience could explain them. We don't actually see objects in the world.
We don't.
No. Our eyes only detect light bouncing off surfaces, and our brains use shortcuts to interpret what those patterns of light mean. Vermeer knew he didn't need to paint the physical structure of a pearl. He only needed to paint the behavior of light hitting a curved surface.
Oh, wow. It's kind of like how a skilled caricature artist only needs 3 quick lines on a napkin to make you instantly recognize a famous celebrity.
Exactly.
Our brains are optimized for pattern recognition over fine detail.
They are.
So Vermeer gives us the absolute bare minimum data required, the sharp specular highlight at the top, the diffuse ambient reflection at the bottom, and completely trusts that our visual cortex will connect the dots.
He outsources the rendering to the viewer's brain.
Our brains look at those two extreme points of light and automatically calculate, the only thing that reflects light that way is a dense, round, polished sphere.
Right. The brain does the heavy lifting, which makes the illusion feel infinitely more realistic than if he had meticulously painted every millimeter of it.
That's brilliant.
And for anyone studying art, this is the ultimate lesson in capturing reality. Sometimes, rendering every single detail perfectly actually makes a painting feel stiff, overworked, and lifeless.
It kills the magic.
Exactly. Giving the brain just enough accurate information about the light and letting the viewer's own perception fill in the blanks create a much more vibrant, breathing reality.
It's the difference between someone explaining the mechanics of a joke to you in excruciating analytical detail versus someone just delivering the punchline with perfect timing.
That's a great analogy.
Vermeer just delivers the visual punchline, the bright pop of light, and our brain sees the pearl.
And this brilliant manipulation of light isn't isolated to the earring either. He uses the exact same optical tricks on her parted lips.
Really?
Yeah. If you look closely at her mouth, he hasn't painted a hard outline of lips. He just placed a few tiny dots of pink and white paint at the corners and the center.
So what are those dots?
He is painting the moisture on her lips, catching the light from the window.
Oh, man. It changes everything about how you experience the image. You step back and you realize you aren't really looking at a traditional portrait of a girl from 1665.
Not at all.
You're looking at a highly engineered matrix of light and shadow designed specifically to trigger a psychological response in your visual cortex.
And it works. 3.5 centuries later, it still works flawlessly.
It really is the ultimate testament to why this painting endures. We are a culture obsessed with identity, with facts, with historical documentation.
Oh, definitely.
We want to know exactly who she was, where she lived, what her social standing was. But generations of viewers have stood in front of that canvas, completely mesmerized by a mystery woman, entirely because Vermeer prioritized human feeling over documentary fact.
Which brings us to the real takeaway of this deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. True artistic mastery, the kind of cultural relevance that survives for hundreds of years, isn't about perfectly replicating reality.
No, it's not.
It isn't about perfectly capturing the exact embroidery on a dress or the exact shape of a rich patron's nose.
It is about using light, shadow,
Right.
and implication to evoke a fundamental human feeling.
Right. Vermeer proved that you don't need a real historical person to capture the profound reality of human connection. You just need a perfectly placed brushstroke of light, a slight pivot of the neck, and parted lips.
By stripping away the specific identity of his model, he left us with pure distilled expression. And because of that absence of identity, the image becomes endlessly adaptable.
It can be whoever we need it to be.
Exactly. Every single viewer who steps into the room can feel that she is reacting specifically to them. She isn't locked in the 17th century. She's perpetually existing in the split second right after you arrive.
It's a masterpiece of cognitive psychology just as much as it is a masterpiece of oil paint. And that leaves me with one final lingering thought that I want to leave you, the listener, with today.
Here.
We've explored how her identity is entirely unknown, how she might just be a tronie, a generic study built in an artist's imagination. We've broken down how the heavy pearl hanging from her ear is just an optical illusion, a couple of strokes of lead white paint with literally nothing solid in the middle.
Right.
So if the subject is a fiction and the defining object is a trick of the light, does the painting's enduring power actually come from what Vermeer left out?
Mm.
Is it possible that the blank spaces, the missing identity, the unpainted middle of the pearl, that those vast empty gaps are exactly what allow us centuries later to project our own humanity, our own stories, and our own emotions onto her?
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
Maybe her true genius isn't in what Vermeer managed to put on the canvas, but in the space he left empty for us to fill.